Today we're reviewing for the upcoming quiz on lessons 3.1 to 3.3 for geometry. Here's a picture of a sample mid-chapter test or the quiz that you're going to see something similar to. So we're going to go through each of these problems to review for the quiz. So the first problem, it asks you to tell which segment is skew to IJ, and we're looking at this figure here. So IJ is actually right where I pointed, right here. So skew segments are non-intersecting and non-parallel. So we need to pick which one is not intersecting with IJ or is parallel. So if we look at GH looks like it is parallel, and that would not be the case. So AJ looks like it intersects, so that would also not be skew. If we continue, we have HI, which, let me erase these here. HI looks like it also will intersect with IJ, which is here. So that leaves us with AB, and AB is down here. So yes, that would not be parallel, and that would not be intersecting. Sorry. So the letter here for number 1 would be D, which is segment AB. Now in the same figure, we're looking at plane CDF, which they usually indicate a plane with 3 letters, but in this case the plane actually has 5 letters. So it's CDEFIH, this right here. So if we're looking for a plane parallel to that, that would have to be the back side of this figure, which is GJABE. So we would just list 3 of those letters. So it looks like ABE are the 3 letters that they chose, which is letter H for number 2. So plane ABE. Now the next 3 questions, the next 3 questions all relate to this right here, this diagram. So if we can look at that closer, we're going to answer those questions based on the diagram. So if we look at angles 2 and 4, and I've made this a little bit larger, we need to know the relationship for angles 2 and 4. So here is, here is 2 right here and 4 right here. So it looks like one is inside 2 lines and one is outside the 2 lines, PQ. So they are both on the same side, so that would indicate that they are corresponding. Now if we look at angles 3 and 12, those would be here and here. It looks like they both alternate on the transversal of G, and it looks like they are both outside of the 2 lines Q and R, so that would make them alternate exterior. And then the last problem related to that figure, it says given that P and R are parallel, so that would be line P and line R. If those 2 are parallel, and it gives us angle 8, which is inside those 2 lines, we need to find angle 11, which is also inside those 2 lines. They are on the same side, so that actually makes them consecutive interior, and consecutive interior angles are going to be equal to 180. So if we have angle 8 being 119, we have to add x and make it equal to 180. So we're basically subtracting 119 from 180. So if we subtract 119 from 180, that gives us 61. as our answer, which is letter B. Now, if we're going down to part 2, on the second part of the quiz, we're going to look at number 6, which relates to this diagram here. And let me make that a little bit larger. And we need to find the values of the variables here. So we need to know what kind of angles they are to relate them to each other. If we're going to start with, let's say, the two x values, we would need to figure out what the relationship between this angle and this angle are. So if we're looking at these two lines, which they're indicating as parallel, with the two little triangles there, they are both outside of those two lines, and they alternate. Actually, that is not correct. Let's look a little more carefully here. Okay, actually what I was saying before is correct. So if we're comparing these to the x values and the angles, they alternate, okay, and if we think of these two lines as being the transversal, they're both going to be alternating those transversals, and they are both outside of the transversals, actually, sorry, inside of these lines, so they would be alternate interior, okay, which is a little tricky to see just because there's two sets of lines, but that would make them equal to each other, because alternate interior are equal. So we're going to put them equal to each other to solve for x, and we would subtract to combine like terms. So we get 22 equals x minus 6, and so x would be 28. And then once we have x is 28, we can plug that into this angle for 4x minus 6 and compare the 5y plus 11 and the 4x minus 6, and those are actually also alternate interior. So if we plug in the 28 with the 4x minus 6, we're going to figure out what that is equal to. And that's going to give me 112 minus 6, or 106. So I'm going to put the equal, the 5y plus 11 equal to 106. And now solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 11. It's going to give me 95 equals 5y, and then divide by 5, which gives me 19 for y. So x is 28 and y would be 19. The next one relates to the graph for 7 and 8, and we're just finding the slope of each line. So line K, we're going to use these 2 points, -2, 2, and 2, 4. And with the slope, you subtract the y's over the x's. I always like to keep it positive if I can, but I'm going to do 4 minus 2, so that means I take 2 and subtract -2 for the x's, which gives me 2 over 4, which simplifies to 1/2. So line K, the slope would be 1/2. And the next one, line M, we have -4, -1, and 0, -2. Again, we're taking our y coordinates and subtracting this one. We don't really have a choice, but let's do -1 minus -2. That'll give us a positive. And then -4 minus 0. So we get 1 over -4, and we can't simplify that anymore, so our answer would be -1/4. And then if we look at the bottom, the last two, we're determining whether line AB is and DF are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So what I would do is find the slope of both of them and then compare the slopes. Because if they have the same slopes, they're parallel. If they have opposite signs and reciprocal slopes, they're perpendicular. And if they have neither one of those, then obviously they would be neither. So if we're finding the slope of AB, we have -2, -11 as one point and 6, 5 as the other. So that's going to give us -11 minus 5 over -2 minus 6, or -16 over -8, which simplifies to +2. If we do the same thing for DF for number 9, DF's points are -7, 10, or -10, and 2, 8. So again, take the y's, subtract, and take the x's, subtract. We get -18 over -9, and that is also +2. So that would make these two parallel. And then the last problem, again, we're doing the same process as number 9. So we're going to take the 2 points for AB, and that's going to be -1, 6, and 2, -9. We're going to subtract -9 from 6, so 6 minus -9, and -1 minus 2 gives us 15 over -3, or -5. And then we're doing the same thing with DF, so -10, -1, and 5, 2. That's going to give us -1 minus 2 over -10 minus 5, which is -3 over -15, which is +1/5. So notice that they are reciprocals of each other and opposite signs, so these would be perpendicular. And that concludes our review for the upcoming quiz on lessons 3.1 through 3.3 for geometry.